Hi everyone, and welcome to today's chat. My name is Trinia. I'm a team member here at Understood. And today's chat is going to be about preventing behavior challenges at school. And we're super lucky to have Dr. Lynne Kenney joining us. Lynne is a pediatric psychologist. She's written several books and also created a social emotional learning program. So Lynne, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, it's my honor to join you.
Great. Do you want to take just a minute to introduce yourself, give a little more background about your history and experience?
Oh, sure. I've been a licensed psychologist for 25 years now in Arizona, and I work with children who have executive function challenges, ADHD, learning challenges. My specialty for years has been ages 2 to 9, but since I now teach internationally, we've created programs even for high school kids and adults.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
My honor.
And I know this topic is especially important right now as some schools have already started and some schools are getting ready to start, and parents might be starting to feel maybe some anxiety or just wanting to be prepared for the new school year and make sure their kids are off to the right foot. And this is especially important or especially concerning maybe for parents who have had issues with behavior in the past. Maybe their kids have been acting out in class, or maybe something came up at the end of last school year and they're just worried about getting off on the right foot this school year. But I know a lot of times it helps parents if they can kind of understand where these behaviors are coming from, why their kids might be acting out. So I'm wondering if you can start us off by talking a little bit about why do some kids have behavior challenges? Why might they be acting out in school? What are some of these reasons that parents could be looking for?
Yeah, it's an exciting yet anxiety-provoking time for both the parents and the teachers and the kids. So I really think that what we've learned in neuroscience and education over the last 30 years is that we used to think misbehavior was willful. We now know that at least 98% of the time, misbehavior is a skill deficit. It's a message to us that a child is having a challenge, whether it's a communication challenge. They might have misunderstandings. They might have dysregulation challenges. They can be sensory overwhelmed. They can have trouble with their attention or their memory. They can be responding to their stress response. So I think that what we've got to do is seek to understand before we intervene. I love to help the children be cognitive scientists and the parents be detectives and really watch, do a diary, journal. What kinds of behaviors is the child exhibiting? Under what circumstances? What time of the day? How did they sleep? How did they eat? So there are great articles on understood.org about this as well. We just really have to not think of it as willful and not think we need to punish. We need to identify what skills the kid is needing and then build those skill sets.
Oh, I love that so much. We talk a lot at Understood about how behavior it's like sending a message, right? The kids are trying, they're struggling in some sort of way. There's some skill that they're lacking, or maybe they're feeling overwhelmed or unable to do whatever's being asked of them at that moment. And so behavior is kind of like the messenger, letting us know something's wrong. And I love how you talked about involving the kids in this process of figuring out what is causing this issue. Maybe can you talk a little bit more about how parents can involve kids in that process and how they can talk to their kids about these challenges?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, 30 years ago when a child would misbehave, we would respond believing that we needed to control them or manage their behavior. And we now know that we need to connect, communicate, and cooperate. So we focus on the 3 C's, and that means that what I do with the parents and children is I teach them how to observe the behavior and then wonder aloud about it. Jonathan, and not in the moment. See, the interesting thing is when the child is having a dysregulated state, anxiety, anger, a blow up, what we want to do then is actually use self-regulation strategies to calm them down. But later, and I've got a few strategies I can share with you, but later when we've got our thinker active again, not our caveman, we can say, Jonathan, it was hard for us to get out of the house this morning for school. Or, I saw, Sarah, that when you got in the car yesterday, you were really upset and you started fighting with your sister right away. That must have been painful for you. May I help you with that? And then we teach the kids to be the best coaches for their own brains. So what you're doing is you're raising their metacognition and helping them observe, oh, my energy is rising, or, I use a thermometer, but there's all sorts of great strategies. They have to begin to develop some self-awareness, and that happens by parents wondering aloud and talking about it in kind of a puzzled way. Wow, let's figure this out. How can we be the best coach for your brain? How can I be your best helper?
I love that. Thank you. And I forgot to mention for our viewers out there, if you have a question today for Lynne that you want to ask about behavior, go ahead and type it in the comments box, and we will get to as many questions as we can. But as we're waiting for parent questions to come in, I'm going to keep going because I think there's a lot of great information that our parents are trying to get, and that's why we have you here. We're so happy. So when we're talking about getting started on off on the right foot in this school year, what can parents do to help make sure that a teacher is ready for their child and that their child is starting off with a good relationship with their new teacher?
Well, I think that first it begins at home, and then we make a bridge to the school. So at home, we really do want to set up a lot of consistent routines. We want a lot of patterns. We want the child's home life before, during, and after school to be highly predictable. So the parents in my practice, I say, let's start your back to school routines 2 weeks before we start school so the kids can adapt. That means we change the sleep routines. We go from eating our donuts, which kids are all excited about, to eating our protein for breakfast. We make those changes. So you're sending a ready-to-learn kid to school. That's the first step. Then the next step is, take the opportunity to talk with the teacher. The teacher is your ally. Teachers want to know about your child. They want your child to succeed. Yes, they have many kids in the classroom often, but you can be a real team player by maybe sending a little one sheet. I have my parents send a little one sheet. Sometimes it's either an index card or an 8.5 by 11 with a few bulleted points about their child. This is what my child likes. This is what he responds well to. If he poses a challenge for you, he tends to respond well when you do this. Like, as an example, when you ask a child to help you or you pose a challenge to them, like the child's having a challenge and you're like, oh, Jonathan, or oh, Sarah, can you help me with X? You engage their thinker and get them out of their stress response, and then they're able to behave better. So a parent knows how to engage the child usually, and the new teacher doesn't. So tell them the best way to engage. And then expect the best. I really tell my parents, please don't over-label your child. Don't send the teacher a full, long history of all the challenges they've had. Set everybody up for success. We're not minimizing or pretending, but we're saying this is a new year, and we've developed really helpful strategies over time, and I'm going to tell the teacher what they are, and then I'm going to say, we'd like to implement some of your strategies, teacher, in our home too, so let's keep the bridge of communication open.
Mm-hmm. I really like that idea of a fresh start and not having to write all of these issues that the child has been having or that maybe had last year, and letting the child have that fresh start and to start over and having that optimistic attitude that things can be different and that we've developed strategies that we can use when things are difficult. I think that's really great. And also, like, sharing those ideas with the teacher. If you know something that is working, a teacher is getting to know all of the students in her classroom, his or her classroom, at the beginning of the year, and having like little tidbits of information from parents like that can be super helpful. I know I was a high school teacher previous to working with Understood, and getting that personal connection with parents and having that positive relationship where they can share their ideas with me, and I could also share things that maybe we're working in the classroom with the parents can also be really helpful too.
I'm glad you said that. I want to build on that. Yeah. I notice that parents and teachers with challenging children who have high need sets, they set off our own personal fear response. And then we get defensive, or we get angry, or we say, you're not implementing the IEP well. I really like to say, let's really nurture everybody from the inside up and work as a team. If things aren't going well, we've really got to communicate. I've got to expect that you, Trinia, as the high school teacher, want the best for my child. And so I'm not going to get agitated. I always say, regulate, don't frustrate. We've got to all stay regulated. We've got to model the sense of calm and then help one another to serve our children well.
Absolutely. And I would say from my experience, yeah, most of teachers do really want what's best for the child, but it's not always easy, right? And so I think a lot of times that's what can cause these rifts between families and teachers, is that it's a difficult situation sometimes, especially when kids have behavior challenges and you're trying to figure out where this is coming from and how we can best intervene. And so the more that we can work together as teachers and as families, obviously the better that's going to be for the kid. Oh, did you want to jump in?
Well, I just wanted to say, I was talking to a teacher in Connecticut about 2 weeks ago, and she said, Lynn, I had a hard class last year, and I need to do things differently. And so we actually set up how she was going to talk about the culture of her classroom, how she wasn't going to talk about rules, but she was going to talk about expectations, how she was going to teach the kids that they are the best coaches for their own brains. And then she implemented rhythmic heavy work as the first thing they did in order to help everybody regulate at the beginning of the day. And I'm even doing this in my practice. When I go in to do executive function coaching or I work with children who have dyslexia, I'll do rhythmic tapping activities with them. I do a pattern, then you do a pattern. Or I'll do heavy work where we do a few push-ups and we're doing it 1, 2, pause, 2, up, 2, pause. And I'm just changing everything I do, talking to these teachers, just saying, we've got to get the brain and the body working together to help these kids self-regulate first thing in the morning and then periodically through the day. So this teacher, I love to have little column responses. And I said, when your kids are starting to get unruly, because they would just move about the classroom as they wished, and then she would get into like damage control and think that she needed to control everybody. So we established a call and response where she was going to say something specific like, does everybody need to tap, tap, tap? And that would mean let's sit down and do some rhythmic tapping as an example. So what I'm telling you is that there are kind of preventative strategies we can use instead of waiting to get into damage control, especially if we have agreed with the children ahead of time, this is going to be our plan for when things get unruly.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. We talk about on Understood, we have an article about taking brain breaks. And this is great for the classroom and also for parents who are working with their kids during homework time. We know that our brains can only focus for a certain amount of time, right? And for kids, that's even less. And so it's so important to have those break times where, and some kids might need like a lot of physical activity to do jumping jacks or something, and other kids might want to sit quietly and do like a little mindfulness. And it really depends on the kid, but having like those breaks or those physical movements can be super helpful in getting the brain to like regulate and be able to refocus. Lynn, we're getting a lot of questions from parents coming in. So I do want to move to some of those questions. And we have a question. A parent is asking about their 7-year-old who is having trouble with social skills. It says he loves company, but not communicating. So do you have any suggestions for how to help kids, especially younger kids, this one's 7, with communicating and social skills?
Well, I think this is a brilliant question because communication isn't one thing. We can communicate with our eyes, with our gestures, with our bodies. And sometimes we're not going to only do reciprocal communication, which is what we usually think about. You and I are reciprocating right now. Sometimes you can just have what I call perpendicular or parallel communication, meaning that I might not have the communication skills to engage in a give and take conversation like we are having right now. I might need to learn how to just sit next to another child and play with them in a reciprocal manner before I can even use language. And then we can attach the language. So if we're doing cars or something like that, you can encourage the child to pass the car and then to look at the child and smile. And you're like, very nice, Robert. That was a beautiful smile. Let's pass the car back. You can use balls. So you can use balls, passing balls back and forth, passing beanbags back and forth. We can teach reciprocal communication without using language initially is my whole point. Because I just heard the other day from some speech pathologists in Atlanta, they said, Lynn, the kids are coming in with the lowest speech skills we've ever seen in the 30 years of history that we've been running this clinic. And they said, we think it's because they're with their thumbs on their digital technology from 9 months on. And I said, well, we're not going to get rid of digital technology. It's here to stay. So let's talk about how to teach reciprocal language, how to model language, how to use description. This is another key thing, Trinia. For those little kids who are 7, the mother and father and teacher can be describing what they're doing and then, interacting with the child in that way. Oh, we're going to do our homework. I think I'll go get the pencils. Then you bring the pencils over and you say, Samantha, which color shall I choose? So you can encourage communication that way as well.
Mm-hmm. We have a question about at what age can kids become self-reflective? And so we talked earlier about engaging kids in this conversation and helping them to reflect on their own behavior. But this parent also has a 7-year-old. And says he seems oblivious to how his meltdowns affected others or what may have triggered him. And she's asking, can I expect my 7-year-old to be self-reflective, or what kind of conversation should I be having with a 7-year-old?
Well, that's brilliant. So a 7-year-old can be like a 3 or a 4-year-old. We've got to remember that there's a chronological age and then there's a developmental age. So when I call this the yellow brick road of development, Trinia, I say that when we're doing behavioral interventions, we often jump in too far down the road. And we've got to look at what the scaffolded skills are, at the earlier stages or earlier steps. So the answer is that some 3-year-olds can be self-reflective. It depends on the child. But if you've got a 7-year-old who doesn't have any observing ego, that's normal. Developmentally, you don't have observing ego typically at 7 years of age. So you need to start drawing it out, helping them observe other things. Like when you go to the playground and you see a child walking the dog, you comment. You're like, oh, Samantha, look, the little girl's walking the dog. What's the dog about to do? Oh my golly, he wants to be petted. You got to practice observing other things in order to help kids develop their own self-observing skills. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's really a useful practical skill.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And it also plays in a lot to that mindfulness that we talk about, and helping kids to develop that mindfulness of observing. Well, first you start by observing what's going on around you, right? But then you can apply it to yourself and observe what am I feeling and what is making me feel this way. I'm getting more questions about recess time and behavior challenges that happen on the playground or at lunch. And my feeling is that this is generally an area where there's less structure, there's fewer teachers around, and this parent specifically was saying that her child does fine in the classroom, has a really good relationship with his teacher, but then once it becomes recess and lunchtime, there's more behavior challenges. So do you have suggestions for parents and for teachers who might be dealing with this?
Well, this is super common. We all go through this. I would say that here, teaching your child that the sequence is the secret really helps. So what we teach the children is that everything we do has a beginning, middle, and end. And when we're going out to recess, we need to have a plan about what that beginning, middle, and end is going to look like. And it can be made up of lots of beginning, middle, and ends. So you want to give the child some ability to think and plan. When I go out to recess, what's the first thing I'm going to do? And I get little squares or little index cards and we draw out. What's the beginning of recess going to look like? As you're standing at the door, we always play with Martians. So we say, what would the Martians see? Or what would the principal see? How would you be holding your body? Where would you be planning to go? See, they aren't thinking. They're just responding. So we have to give them thoughtful thinking. So, all right, what are you going to do with your body? Where are you going to plan to go? Where are you going to plan to go first? And I always ask the children, what's your plan? If I see them on the playground and they're out of control, I'm like, Jennifer, what's your plan? Because we have to get them thinking, my plan is to go to the tricycles. I'm going to ride the tricycle, then I'm going to put the tricycle away, and then I'm going to go here. So there's a beginning, middle, and end. And then you've got to have a plan B always, because they go to the tricycles, they fight over the tricycles, there aren't enough of them. So you got to say, now, I hear that your plan, the beginning is you're going to go to the tricycles, the middle is you're going to ride the tricycle, the end is you're going to put the tricycle back. What if there are no tricycles available? We need a plan B. So those are the types of things. We've got to really add more structure and more thinking to how it is the children are entering into recess, experiencing recess, and what I call it tying a bow on things when they're done with recess.
Mm-hmm. And we had a similar question asking about classes like physical education or gym class, library, and music. And this is a 6-year-old going into first grade, and this parent says that he has more challenges in these special classes than he does in the regular classes. And I'm guessing it's the same sort of thing of not having the same structure, being with a different teacher, a different environment. But do you have any special advice for what to do about these classes?
Well, one thing I'd like is if the teachers in these different settings would communicate their expectations very clearly to the kids, because you are totally right on. You're in this classroom with one teacher, about 5 hours a day, and you are consistently being reminded of the culture and how you're to behave and how we're going to treat each other respectfully, et cetera, et cetera. But then you go to the special, often inconsistently. In Arizona, you never even know when your PE class is going. It's changing all the time. So I'm not sure if that's true with music. So when we were young, we would go to music 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 a.m. That predictability is gone now. And so we need to really have the parent talk with the teacher. What are the expectations in your classroom? How is your classroom run from beginning, middle to end? Because I want to role play this at home with my child. And then I would play music class, or I would play PE class. And I would ask questions. What's working in this class for you? What's not working in this class for you? Help the child develop strategies and even write them down, draw them, dictate them, teach grandma and grandpa them. That's what I would do with that situation.
That's great. Thanks. We have a parent asking about what about for older kids? So do you have any suggestions or advice for older kids who maybe are having behavior challenges? And specifically, this parent's asking about during those transition times. So moving from class to class, going to lunch, coming back from lunch. So what can we do to help support older kids?
Yeah, transitions are a challenge for everybody, from 2-year-olds sometimes to 60-year-olds. Because what happens is the brain, with the loss of structure, the brain has to make decisions, active, thoughtful decisions about what you're going to do with your brain and your body during the transition. And so I just have honest conversations with these older kids, 16-year-olds who end up grabbing other people's backpacks or taking kids' lunch money, stuff like that. I tell them, the transition isn't a free-for-all. The transition is a time when you've got to be the best coach for your brain. So let's think, as you're doing the transition, let's talk about what's the path you're going to walk. What are you going to do with your hands? Are you going to listen to your music or not? Are you going to pick up a certain friend at a certain spot so you can make sure you don't have to go to the lunchroom on your own? We have to really help the kids coach their own brains. And that kind of means that parents are co-regulating and being the brain with the child as you're trying to develop these strategies for more successful behavior, not better behavior, but more adaptive behavior.
We have a parent who's asking about sensory processing issues. And she has a 5-year-old who seems to be having sensory processing issues. And she doesn't say specifically which type of sensory processing issues that this child is having. But do you have any advice for what might be helpful? He's just starting school. The first day of class is today. And so do you have suggestions for what helps with sensory processing issues, especially when you're in a classroom environment dealing with all kinds of different sensory input?
Well, you have so many senses. We always talk about having 5, but you actually have at least 7. So it's easy for one of your senses to get overwhelmed, especially in a new, unstructured environment with new expectations. So the thing that I would try to do is be a detective with the child and try to identify how their body's feeling, what sense gets overwhelmed easily, and then try to develop some strategies, probably sensory diet strategies, in order to calm those senses. I will tell you that this field has grown enormously, and there are wonderful, I know a lot of speech pathologists and occupational therapists who do fabulous sensory interventions. So you can read, you can go to websites and read sensory strategies. I think I have a list of books on my site. I bet Understood has a list of books. But and there's so many recommendations, but first you got to understand before you intervene. What is the sensory challenge? When is it coming up? What can calm it? Because as you said at the beginning of our conversation, some children like to be quiet and thoughtful, and I call them little snails or turtles, and other kids are wanting to have a lot of body pressure or do tapping or drumming. So we got to find out what's the sensory challenge, and then what is the child needing in order to calm that sensory system.
Absolutely, that's a great point. Yeah. And if you are looking for more information, we definitely have articles on sensory processing issues that you can find on understood.org. And there's a little search bar that you can just type that in and the articles will pop up. I do want to squeeze in just one more question. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. But this parent has a 4-year-old who's having trouble at school due to aggression. And this is towards other children, such as like pushing or grabbing toys away from other kids. And this child also has trouble staying still during class time. So do you have any advice for this parent of how to work with this child to figure out what's going on and intervene so that he can be more successful in school?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it might require a special type of setting, and I don't mean a special school, but a teacher who understands that aggression in a 4-year-old is often a sensory issue, meaning that some kids are sensory seeking, some kids are sensory avoiding. So I don't know in this situation, but the pushing can be seeking proprioceptive feedback, or the pushing can be you're encroaching on my space and I'm becoming sensory overwhelmed. So there are many teachers who are great at intervening in this way. What I like to do with these kids at 4 years of age is practice the difference between, as an example, being a tiger and being a turtle. So I play little animal games with them. And I say, well, when two tigers come and they meet, how can they behave successfully? How can they interact successfully? And sometimes we make up songs and things like that. You have to start to not control the aggression, but give the child the ability to manage their internal energy so that they can calm their caveman and bring their thinker online in order to implement solid problem solving and strategies when the sensory overwhelm or the cognitive misunderstanding takes place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I do want to give you the opportunity. Do you have any last words of advice or recommendations for parents as they're helping their kids either get ready for school in this new school year, or maybe they've already started? Any last thoughts for parents?
Well, the thing that I learned the most working with complicated kids and beautiful families is that you've got to prepare to prevent. So do take the time the night before to make the sandwiches, and do be ready for the day, because if the parent is dysregulated, then everything kind of falls apart. So the more you can regulate yourself, practice your calming skills, make everything ahead of time, have the kids' clothing laid out, or have preparation for them to make their choices. The more routine you can get and the more you can prepare and plan to prevent, the better the school year is going to go.
I love that you ended on that note. We all know that our moods affect other people's moods, and that if we're feeling frustrated or anxious or in a hurry all the time, that is going to wear off on our kids. And vice versa. If they're feeling that, it makes us feel frustrated. And so being able to take a step back, be prepared, do some of that mindfulness or doing exercise or whatever makes us feel better is going to have loads of benefits, not just for ourselves, but also for our kids. So thanks so much for ending with that note. And thank you to everyone for joining us today.
Yes,
if your question didn't get answered, you might want to join our community where other families and parents are discussing questions and challenges that they might have. Sometimes our experts, just like Lynne, pop in and answer a question as well. You can find that at u.org/community. And if you're looking for our upcoming chats, or if you want to rewatch this chat, they're all recorded, and you can see that calendar of events at u.org/calendar. Lynne, thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. I wish everybody a beautiful school year.
And thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great day.